Okay, so we're looking at IELTS task 1. Okay, and this time we're going to be looking at a pie chart. Pie. Okay, and our topic is the first chart below shows how energy is used in an average Australian household. The second chart shows the greenhouse gas emissions which result from this energy use. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. You should write at least 150 words. Okay, so your structure for this type of task 1 is pretty standard. So you'll have your introduction plus your paraphrase. And you'll give your overview, okay, of your main trends. And in your overview, you should identify 2 main features or 2 main trends you'll talk about. And then you also talk about trend 1 and then trend 2. So overall, you should have 3 paragraphs for your task 1. You don't need a lot more than that if you write clearly. Okay, so let's take a look at these graphs. We've got the energy use and we've got greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm scanning through, I'm looking for the main features. Well, the first thing I'm noticing is that heating uses 42% of energy but only gives 15% greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so I'm thinking this is going to be a feature that I want to talk about because there's a big difference there. Okay, and then the other big differences I'm looking at other appliances are similar. We're using 15% of energy use, but it's the opposite. Okay, but we're giving 28% of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so maybe the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compare these features. Okay, so while heating uses a lot of energy but you have a lot of greenhouse gas, other appliances doesn't use that much energy but gives out more greenhouse emissions. So I'm going to compare that. I think would be a good comparison to make. And then I would probably talk about, so cooling and water heating are almost the same, and then lighting and refrigeration actually are doubled. So if I look, I can see lighting is 8 and 4, refrigeration is 7. So I would probably talk about that as my second interesting trend and maybe compare that to cooling and lighting, which stay the same. I mean cooling and water heating, which stay almost the same. Okay, so once you've marked up your chart and you've decided what you're going to talk about and you've made your plan where you've said where you're going to talk about which feature, okay, you should start writing. So let's see what this candidate's done. The top chart illustrates 6 different uses of energy from an average Australian household, and the bottom chart displays the amount of greenhouse gases emitted from these energy uses. Okay, so as a paraphrase, no problem with that. Decent paraphrase. Overall, it can be observed that in the top chart, the most significant uses of energy are water heating, while the bottom chart has water heating and other appliances as the main factors for greenhouse gas emissions in an average Australian household in Australia. Okay, so I think this comparison could be stronger. It's kind of like it's just a listing comparison rather than pointing out what's interesting about it. So if I was going to do my paraphrase, I would say overall, some areas use less energy but emit large amounts of greenhouse gas, such as okay, and then I would do, so you're kind of pointing out what you're going to compare, and then when you get into your body, that's when you're giving the detail about percentages and so on. Okay, and then we've got other appliances are 15% of all energy use, which is about half of their rate of greenhouse gas emissions. Refrigeration uses 7% of energy, and the greenhouse gas emissions is double this amount. Lighting also has greenhouse gas emissions of 4%, which is twice as high as the rate of energy use. Cooling only is a slight difference between the energy use rate and the emission of greenhouse gases at 2% and 3% respectively. Okay, so what they've effectively done in this paragraph is that they've just listed everything that's in the pie chart. They've gone through it section by section, and they've said it's 7% of energy, 14% of emissions, 2% of energy, 3% of emissions. Okay, but what they want to see when you're comparing is they want you to see you pulling out trends and themes. Okay, so you should be directly comparing all these things together. Okay, while heating emits the largest amount of greenhouse gas, it only uses the third most amount of energy, and they give me the supporting detail. Okay, even though like this, in contrast, So you want to be using all your comparison words. So task 1 wants to see you comparing between things. So you need to kind of show that ability and show that skill to get the full points. Okay, and so they've not really, in terms of task achievement, they've not really done what the essay is asking them for. There is a paraphrase, there is a bit of an overview, but they've only got one sort of listing paragraph. So I would kind of give a 5 for task achievement. Coherence and cohesion, it wasn't very cohesive because they weren't comparing throughout, so it kind of suffered there. So I'd probably give a 5 for that. Vocabulary, I thought was limited. So I probably would only give a 5 for vocabulary, and so was grammar. To be honest, I'd put the task achievement down at a 4.5, to be honest. Because they really didn't fulfill what the task 1 was asking them to do. I would say probably scraping an overall 5 for their writing, because their grammar was reasonably consistent and the sentences were quite, I didn't have a lot of grammatical corrections for it. It was understandable what they were trying to do. But I just think they need to practice a bit more what's needed and what's asked for in a task 1 essay.